if my camera sometimes blacks out around the 10, 12 minute
Mm,
mark, but it'll come right back on. You know, when we're bootstrapping, and we just go with it. But we
that's great.
are officially live. So let's get into these formal introductions. Hi, y'all. Hello to the SBG Book Club. We are here for our finale discussion on Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi. And we are here with Porsha. And I'm already messed up how to say your last name. Uh,
Olayiwola, you're great.
that's a lot of syllables. I want to try. I want to try and get it though, because it's the colonizer tongue that's stopping me.
Mm.
So it's Olaye. Wait, let me look at it. Oh, where did I just switch? Where did I just put your name? Sorry, I have intruders in my home.
It's live, this live. It's real life.
Olayewolo.
Olayiwola.
Olayewola.
Or see
Well,
you looking at it. You can't look at it. You just gotta, that's great.
Olayewola.
Yeah, that was great.
Okay, a little bit,
That's
a little
great.
bit. We're getting there. I want to become more cultural. There's somebody on TikTok that I follow that they speak both. They live in New Orleans and they speak both French and English. And I'm just like, I don't want to just speak another language. I want to be a person who can accurately pronounce things, but I can barely pronounce English. So
Same.
we are on the struggle bus here, but this is the finale conversation for Freshwater. I don't know how many people in the book club actually read Freshwater, because I know the kind of general commentary has been the first 5 chapters are a little hard to get through. And I don't know
Mm.
if it's hard a fair way to discuss the first 5 chapters, but I actually, now having read the whole book, I appreciate the way that Akwaeke frames the entire book, because I think we're getting into the exploration track this coming month, and we are going to be doing Playing in the Dark by Toni Morrison, who
Mm.
discusses not writing or centering the white gaze, right?
Mm.
That you write for you write for your community. And I feel like this book really kind of brings you into the culture without trying to, like, sometimes books, like, I'll read books, especially by Black women authors, and I'll feel like, girl, I get this. You write this for the white woman. You try to explain this to me.
Yeah,
And you end
totally.
up skipping, and this really, you kind of have to sit with it, because the author is really bringing you into their world, and you either
Completely.
come or you do have to stop.
Yeah, it's not even for, I don't think it's for anybody but them. It really is one of those texts that you meet them on their terms. And it's lovely. It's really beautiful. And intense and scary and all of those things. So
Yes. So do you refer to yourself as a scholar?
where you
Huh?
find that at?
I feel like that was in your Instagram bio. We had put out a call. We wanted queer and non-binary, particularly Nigerian people, to come in and join us for these discussions, because we really want to do a better job of centering the people um, who are in the narrative of the story. And so there was quite a few people who were really into
I
your
mean,
book.
I reject the academy. Let it be known. No, I'm just kidding. But
Okay.
I do love to read books. Do love to theorize about them, to talk about them. I like writing essays, poems, all of that. But I do reject the academy.
Right,
I'm
but
a,
you don't have to
no,
be a scholar within the academy.
I know. I'm just
You
messing with
could be a scholar, you have your own epistemology, you have your own epistemological process, right, of the community. We also did Black feminist thought, so we're very into bringing everyone into the process of knowledge validation. It is not based.
Absolutely. I'm totally kidding. I'm one of those nerds. I just finished my last paper yesterday, so
And you are joining us from Boston.
it's true. Oh, I love the way you said that.
You
It had
know,
like an accent or something.
the beautiful city of liberal racist white people. I love it. I love it in the summertime. It's a really gorgeous
It is beautiful.
time.
It's where the country's founded, so it does have that legacy. It's like where
That's why y'all
it's the
taxes is so high. I
the
feel
richest,
that.
longest, settlement, if you will, or colonization site. So, yep, all of those ghosts are still up in here.
Yeah. So we're gonna start the discussion with chapter 19, but we're gonna talk about the entire text, in this discussion. We're just going to start with the ending because we have not discussed the ending yet. And the ending really, this is one of like, I think we've read quite a few books in the book club where we get to the end and we're like, great book, but the ending. And I feel like I got to the end and I'm like, oh, this really it just wrapped everything up so nicely.
Mm-hmm.
And there was just so much to like really like, I don't know that it didn't, is it cathartic? I don't know that my feelings or my emotions about the book were done at the end, but I felt like I got a really good playing field, especially with these last 3 or 4 chapters, in which to think about what I just read.
Yeah. There's a little bit of distance from what's going on with Ada and what we experience as we read it, and understand what's happening to Ada, and then as we like move through the whole book, Ada, we only get her or their perspective maybe 2 times in the narrative, right? It's only written from their perspective, but then in the end we get it twice, and it's the longest we've ever gotten. So it is this like final, I don't know if it's reconciliation, but there is like something that feels distant from what was happening to Ada versus what Ada has to say now. Mm-hmm. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
In the audiobook they say Ada.
Ada, thank you.
Yeah, so for the syllabus and for chapter 19, we wanted to reference on page 202, which is definitely from the perspective of Ada. Actually, let me just open it, make sure I'm getting this right, because we have gotten so much Ashugara.
I know, right?
We finally get like the Ada. We get, and not the Ada, but we get Ada, the person, right? Like the being. And the quote we're pulling is in her letter to her Yeshua. Ada says, I don't feel trapped or anchored, which is really strange, Yeshua. I stopped being afraid of relocations. I can move wherever I want because I know that I will be loved constantly across all space. Mm-hmm. And, this was something we talked about in the last 2 discussions, because Yeshua is very obviously Jesus and a commentary on Christianity. And for the Ada who expresses that their family is Catholic, I think we can bilaterally say, oh, it's a commentary on Catholicism. But I appreciated how the book doesn't necessarily dunk on Christianity. Mm-hmm. Like, it's critical in a way that also makes you kind of check your own feelings, and also acknowledges that Yeshua outside of the building of the church, the organization, mm-hmm. actually has a role in helping Ada come into themselves.
Absolutely. Which makes sense. I think some of the Obanji, like throughout the text, is always like, why do you love this one so much? And I think it is a part of Ada, right? Like, how do I pronounce that? Is it Yashua?
Yeah, so I had to listen to the audiobook, which is the only way I know how to say some of these things. And so Akwaeke reads it with a Nigerian accent, and so they say mm-hmm.
Yeshua. But yeah, I think Ada's just like, or the Abanji is asking Ada all the time, like, why do you love this one? Why do you keep this one? And I think it is because it is a part of it. But I think also the writer lends themselves to a duality, or a multitudes of identity. And I'm even thinking, just like Nigerian culture, the Indian culture, like those two for me, I just think of automatically like spirituality and all the different spiritualities associated with those two cultures. And so I don't know, it feels like it makes sense. It feels like it makes so much sense. And I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but there was a line earlier in the book that was just saying, how a lot of these gods are either similar or one and the same, or, versions of each other. So I don't know. I agree. I like that too. I didn't feel like Christianity was like frowned upon.
Mm-hmm. And it was enough. It definitely gives respect to the place that like Christianity, it didn't fall into the trope of, oh, Christianity is the white man's religion, that, especially Yeshua existing alongside these brothers, sisters, or these other gods who are very much so calling for the Ada to go home.
Mm-hmm.
which is, going back to their ancestral land, being rooted in where they're from.
Mm-hmm.
And Yeshua wasn't actually at odds with that. Yeshua was just, I'm about love, and I'm about love. I'm not gonna show up. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna be present, but I am about love. And so I will help you through the social contracts you have made with your
Mm-hmm.
existence. But I ain't gonna do too much more.
That's it. That's it. I gave you some things, some tools, some resources. But I don't know. I think that reminds me when I was like rereading this, one thing I wrote is that this is like a coming of age story. There's always these coming of age, and obviously, the speaker or the speakers are older, in more ways than one. We know that one is like surpassed college, right? So it's like not your typical coming of age story, but something about it is coming of spirit. It's a coming of spirit story. It's really interesting. Like, what Ada learns as they move through this.
Yeah, so if we move into chapter 20, we get chapter 20, I think, really, like, if I want to say what makes the ending so great, I really have to give it to like this 2 page. Is it 1, 2, 3, 4 page chapter? And I also, because it does, this book kind of like, again, challenges your understanding of
A
mental
lot of
health,
things.
and
Hmm.
how do we, what opportunities, what chances do we give to people, right? Because I want to love the Ada, but would I be friends with Ada, right? And if I was
Talk
someone
about it.
who crossed Ada's path in college, would I be able to, like, it literally made me think of so many people who I have dealt, especially Black women, who I may have felt harmed by, very justifiably so, but like, what trauma were they dealing with themselves that they were
Hmm.
trying to navigate?
It really is a lot to think about. And I'm glad you said that, because there was a moment in the book, maybe it happened earlier on, where Ada says that one or two of their friends came to get them and called 911.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that's amazing, because I did not expect you to be a person with friends. Like,
But one thing, but
because
you know what? We talk like the thing. I don't, because I'm like, I would not be this person's friend. Like, couldn't do it. But then it's like, you know what? I might be their friend because they're, for all of their, what we can claim to be craziness, with all them battling their own spirits,
Mhm,
they were very vulnerable. And I think the
absolutely.
people that were their friends, and specifically the women who remained in their lives because they could see Ada was struggling, and they never hid their struggles to this set of friends.
Absolutely. And I think, and I like joke, like I couldn't be friends with that person. I'm not going to lie. I did have that thought, but the reality is this person is already ingrained in our lives. They're
Yeah.
like they are our friends. They're our partners. Sometimes they us, like,
Mm-hmm.
because it really does beckon the question of mental health and like how it shows up versus what's actually happening in the body, right? Because like sometimes I read about Ada and I'm like, oh, you just like quote unquote the free spirit,
Mm-hmm.
you're like, having free sex, you're smoking weed. I know you. I totally know you.
And
And
what we know Ashugara, and that's what I really had to say, because I actually know
okay, talk
someone
about it.
who reminds me a lot. And I was like, I'm reading the book, and I'm like, I don't like this bitch. And then I'm like, but wait, it's Ashugara, right? And because we're
Mm,
in the Ada's mind, and therefore we get to hear directly from Ashugara, we do know the person that's free love. They might, classify as some sort of non-traditional, non-heteronormative, supposedly, but they
mhm.
still very much so rely on the male gaze, right? Like, I'm bi, I'm queer, and I'm poly, but they're still very much so like just focused on validation through men, and that's how we
Yeah.
perceive it.
Right. That's how
But
we perceive
that's how
it.
we see it. We don't know what's happening internally and what they're really, processing when they are in these scenarios, and what does it
Yeah.
mean for someone, especially like Ada, who's dealing with dissociative identity disorder, that they are experiencing, and they're responding to this a significant amount of trauma in ways in which they might not even recollect.
It's wild. It's really wild when I think about trauma. And I don't know if you read other works by this writer, but all of the ways in which they are to reconceptualize trauma and dealing with mental health is just, it's a really incredible. But can I read this part real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. 209, right? But sectioning the Ada gave her isolated pockets of memory, each containing a different version of her. There were versions to whom bad things had happened, and therefore there were also versions of her to whom these things had not happened. And I don't know. I don't know if that's what you're talking about in the ending, but for me, that was one of the things that stood out. Is like there are all of this terrible stuff happened, and sometimes it didn't, or like there are moments in which it didn't happen to us. So I don't know. I really
No, that is,
appreciate
it's
what
that
this.
exact passage. You know what it reminds me of? Michaela Cole's "I May Destroy You." I don't know if you watched that series on
Mm,
HBO Max. And then it also reminds me, just to give y'all a trigger warning because we will be discussing sexual assault. I've done videos about this. I've been raped, right? And so it's thinking about like that you've had trauma happen to you that happened to you, but like you were not there because literally
mm,
your body left you. I mean, I've had the misfortune
absolutely.
of dating men. I have had trauma happen to me, and literally, like, I think back to the day, and I'm like, why didn't I do X, Y, Z? And it's like, were you even there?
Yeah, and which God protected you?
But you disassociate as a protection, right?
Absolutely. It's like both science, like we have the psychology, the theories behind it, but
Mm-hmm.
also is there the spiritual connection to it, which I think that I don't know. I think they do it again. They do it so well.
Yeah, no, and yeah, it just makes you really think and reframe because, and so we talk a lot. We're talking more, not that we talk a lot, but we're getting more language around how to acknowledge, yeah, scientifically, biologically, how trauma can change the receptors in your mind.
Absolutely.
And so, is it fair to say that the Otto really went crazy, or did the Otto just take maybe not what we've been told is the same route for dealing with your trauma? And do we even have a framework for actually dealing with our trauma? Because
Yeah.
the fact that we are an oppressed and therefore traumatized people often means that, yeah, I can sit here and say I wouldn't be friends with the Ada because of the way Ashugara showed up in their life, but like also like part of why I know that there is no zero sum in like abolition and that we are complicated people is that because I know that I will harm somebody in my lifetime, but what do
Hmm.
I do? Like how did I
Hmm.
how did I get to that point, and what do I do to restore and repair these people after? Like I have to own that as I work through my own trauma, I'm not consciously going to do these things, but I very likely
Right.
subconsciously will pass on the trauma that still lives within me at some point to other people. And
Talk
so,
about it.
this book
Complex. We
just
are
brought up all
complex.
those feelings. Yeah.
Yeah, it also reminds me of what you said earlier, just that this text might not be written for the white gaze, and that it completely disrupts, deconstructs, decolonizes how we think about mental health and the tools that we have. And I don't know, I saw this short film a while ago where this woman, because of this black woman, because of like racial issues, just kind of went ham one day. And like she just went nuts, and she ended up in this hospital, and the story kind of follows her just rocking back and forth, and she seems to be outside of her mind, but really she's just being surrounded by a bunch of other black women who are moving through their own mental health trauma. So I don't know, I think there's something really powerful, to say the least, right, about deconstructing and disconnecting mental health from this European lens.
It also makes me think of Salt Eaters by Tony K. Bombara. Like
I heard you say that, although I bought it today. I had to put it in my buggy.
I need to.
Okay.
It's not an easy book to get through, but I'm like, you know
Mm,
what? The reason why I got through Freshwater is because we read it in the book club. I've
mm,
had this book for a while, and I knew it was good because I heard all the great reviews about it. But I started it and I was like, okay, we're gonna move on to some other things. And then because we read it in the book club, and Salt Eaters is very similar. Like it's just a lot of moving pieces, and you're like, what am I reading right now? But like you also get it as
mm,
like it just connects back to like the trauma that we deal with as Black women and the casual way it walks into our lives.
mhm.
And that the Ada saying that they went understanding that they had this struggle that was much louder is actually a lot less harmful than people that go crazy insane ways.
Wow.
People that can mask, the harm they're doing.
Absolutely. I love that you said that. I want to ask you to repeat it, but I guess I'll just rewatch it because that was something
So
there.
there's a passage in like chapter 2.
Hmm.
I want to say I might have highlighted. I might have put a sticker in it. If I was smart, I'm trying to do
That's
better.
great.
I'm one of them people. I'd be like, "Oh, this is great," and then I'll just highlight it and not like mark it. All right, that's the Python. Like I visually know where it was, but I just don't remember. But in one of the earlier chapters, yeah, they were saying that the saner they are, the more harmful they actually are. Because those are the
Yeah.
ones that do it. Oh, here it goes. And I said, does this challenge the Western DSM ideal of DID? So it's on page 34. It says, but sometimes the flesh takes too well, like those that came through the gates and went mad in a much saner, more terrifying way, meeting human cruelty with colliding glee, losing themselves in the stingy red of mortality. They did atrocious and delicious things to torn people, to screaming and sobbing children. They broke and buried bodies. They hid in fathers and husbands and mothers and cousins. They ripped and they used. They were excited. Yeah. Someone in the comments is asking, did anyone else watch Ratched on Netflix? We also see the same disassociation from one of the black women characters because she endured heavy racial trauma. Speaking of disassociation, because if we had a better version of the Beloved movie by Toni Morrison, and if them had probably read some Toni Morrison, that could have actually been a theme
Absolutely.
in them, which was horrible. It was so
Yeah.
bad.
What was I gonna say? I did not watch them. I'm gonna see if I should watch Ratchet. I'm gonna write that down. But and I don't mean to be basic, but sometimes that's just who I am and where I'm at. But this also reminds me, I don't know if you did this, but back in the day, Zane, did you used to read those
I
Zane
was an
books?
Eric Jerome Dickey person.
I mean, I had a ball.
So I didn't really get into the Zane. I was still on my
I respect it and I don't recommend it. But there was one of the famous ones. Maybe it was Nervous. I can't remember the title exactly, but it seemed ridiculous. But this person was quote unquote addicted to sex, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as they move through it, you learn that they have different personalities that all were, at night having sex with different folks, right? So, like, obviously the text is like problematic and all of its other senses, but I wonder if this is something that Zane was trying to get at back in the day,
Yeah,
It
I mean,
reminds
Zane
me of that.
also is writing in the 90s, so I think there is a lot of room and grace to be given to the author that, like, maybe it didn't age well. Maybe in 2021, it's like, ooh.
I mean, it was bad back then, I'm not going to lie. I bet I was like in 8th grade, Shouldn't have been reading it, to be frank, but.
I was too busy milking my coffee, Lover and Friends, like.
Between Lovers,
Yes,
yes, by Eric
Between
Jerome
Lovers.
Dickey. That was my favorite
Eric
one.
Jerome Dickey lives in Delaware, and I was in Delaware at the time. Yeah, so it was like, me and my mother literally would read these books together. It was crazy.
Wow, that's lovely.
It's crazy. My mom doesn't remember any of this, but it definitely happened.
That's great. I used to love Eric Jerome Dickey. I got a book somewhere around here.
Bring it back to chapter 21, which is a very interesting experience, and it almost feels like, is this the point where like the Ada gets free when they're back in Lagos, Nigeria? Or they're not
What
even
page
in
are you on?
Lagos. So on page 2215.
Okay.
Hold on. And this is we're back we're back through the narrative of the we. Page 211. But the quote we're actually pulling from in the syllabus is on 215. So when the Ada meets Leshy, who is a man with a very strong feminine aura, and they're the first person to positively acknowledge the beings within them and acknowledge their loneliness. Smoke and Shadow admit, here is the truth. She was easier to control when we thought she was weak. The mourning of him became a ritual in of itself, a dramatic enactment of sorrow. The Ada stumbled around blinded by memory. When you have been hiding in great shadow, it hurts to look at the light, to be awake, to feel.
Jeez.
Like the writing is just,
I mean, the writing is outside this world.
it's just immaculate. Like so good. Like even but Leshy had been a pit of beauty and we couldn't find enough anger to keep us afloat.
Mm.
And it's not, you know, sometimes it's like I've read other books, I won't name them. We've read them this year in the book club, and I felt like they were trying to be poetic.
Mm.
It was like a little too hard. It's like, okay, we
Yeah.
get it. You're
Did you read The Death of Vivek?
The what?
The Death of Vivek, OG?
No. Mm-mm.
Yeah, that language is something else too. It's really something else. But I love this page that you pulled out, and I love that moment. Right above that, or right in between that, there is this. She was easier to control when she thought we was weak. Here's another truth: she is not ours; we are hers.
Mm.
And that just really made me pause when I was reading it, or like that was again that resurfacing of power. Is that to think all along we have these gods in us, or we are that, and we have that at our disposal. That was another moment for me where that ending felt okay. I love that you said people keep bringing up the 5 chapters and the fact that you even had to stop and say, what am I reading? Because I do really, and when I was getting to the end of this, I'm just like, how would I have made it to the end if I didn't make it through the first time? I can understand why so many people stop, you know. Or I recommend the book, but I always recommend it with caution because, and I think it is in them first 10 chapters. Honestly, it's just a lot of processing.
Yeah, I mean, you're back in Nigeria with them. They're not giving. They're not. You know, I'm not. I'm not. I'm not associated with this culture. I can't say I'm not from this culture. Let me not get messed up, but I'm not directly associated with this culture.
Yeah.
And so like some of the and then you get this almost like I want to say similar to like Owole Soyinka, sort of like flowery. Like there's a lot of meaning in what they're saying, but it does on first glance read just as flowery. And until you get all the way through the text, like the Death and the King's Horseman, I think is the last thing I read by him. But no, I have another book by and I didn't. I stopped that book too because it was a history book. It was a history book, and I was like, it might have been a collab between him and Chinua, which is why I didn't on the Biafran War, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is outside of my wheelhouse. But like, it was like a love letter to Nigeria, and I was like, okay, I get it. But like that sort of like, you know, by at first glance, you're reading it and you're like, okay, this is real. This is like poetic, but like, where is it going?
Mm-hmm.
But the payoff is worth it. And what really helped me was getting the audiobook.
I read everything on audio.
Yeah, hearing Akwaeke like give like the nuance to the characters, like the tone and the language. It just added. I think I was reading it in my mind, and I don't necessarily, because I'm not Nigerian, I'm not getting all the references to like what Sha and, you know, like the little just clips and how that adds flavor to the context. So listening to the audiobook was really helpful, but I over understand if people are like, this was a little difficult to get into, but it's worth it. It's worth it.
See, that's what I wonder, or that's what I think it's worth it, but I think also, you know, I don't feel exceptionally triggered by the text, but for people who have experienced things similar to Ada, you know, whether that is self-harm or, you know, sexual assault, I think it's like, it's really intense. And, you know, okay.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's experienced a very similar setup to her as with Soren, that I listened to it on the audiobook first. And so like Akwaeke is also a little monotone when reading, like, you know, like not monotone, but matter of fact.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, you know, because Issa Rae's monotone when she reads her books. Akwaeke is this matter of fact. Like it just happened and it happened and it happens. Okay.
And you're gonna roll with it, yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, wait, did I just hear that? And then when I went back and read it, I got to that point. I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to stop and come back to this. Because it is triggering. But we in the syllabus that we provide, we do go over the trigger warnings and just remind people that we're reading in community. So we're here to support each other. Because I also think getting to the end and just going through this whole book really helps you even like feel validated in how you might have responded in that scenario. because a lot of us, anytime you experience that level, like it's not only a trauma, but it's a loss of autonomy and it's a violence against, I mean, what is it, flesh, body, whatever. You feel like, I'm always like, why wasn't I more violent? Like, why wasn't I a gangster? But I can't be a gangster because I wasn't present for this, right? Like, I left my body at that point. And so I've had a lot of resentment about going through violent experiences and not being like, why didn't I just burn this shit down? But like, did I have the means to burn anything down? You can't, we sometimes feel embarrassed because we lacked power, but like literally your power was taken from you. And that's why, as your body is trying to protect yourself, you disassociated.
Yeah,
So
which is its own kind of power. And I totally agree with you. Like by the end, I'm like, man, and I just know so many people who won't open this up. but I totally feel that. Like I feel, that there is some. It's a really fascinating, life-changing way to understand. Yeah, for real, it is, and it's something about it is also power grabbing. It sounds like, like for people being able to see themselves.
In the end of chapter 22, Millennia comes back and reveals that Ada is 16,000 years old. And I think this just kind of gives power to the experiences that Ada was having. Not necessarily like, because in the middle of the book, you do kind of get into, all right, this child crazy, like the Ashugara is on some other shit, right? Then Saint Visit comes back and you're like, oh, okay, I can do this. This is chill. This is chill. But these spirits aren't necessarily, they're not new, right? They're not, we can't dismiss this as something of, and I think this is important. I wonder how important this is in the American lens compared to the Nigerian lens, right? Because I wonder if, as a Nigerian person, if Ada was experiencing a certain dismissal based on this idea of this being white people, American New Age problems. And the fact that, Akwaeke is very clear on this being Obanji, which is a part of Igbo culture, this being brothers, sisters from Allah, and then going through where she meets the priest, and she meets the Igbo priest, who's like, you're on the right path. You do need to dig into the Igbo culture and the Igbo religion to understand what you're going through. That, her spirits are very much so rooted in the history of her ethnic group, versus this being something that people can just be like, that's some American shit. You just going through that because you went to America.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's an interesting question or interesting thought. Yeah, I think that's also something I was thinking about in the text, or like the ways in which Ada, when they went to school, they were able to connect with international students as opposed to any Black American or otherwise.
It's such a common like theme in the Black immigrant in literature experience.
It really is.
I like that it wasn't xenophobic though.
Yes. Well, you know what? It was not xenophobic, but I did have this lingering question as to why that sentence was about the hair, or like, the Black girls from Atlanta, Chicago, Whereas really, I wonder if it was more of an American thing. The fact that, the context of American soul. But going back to just what you said about the priests and stuff, I don't know. That reminds me again of just this idea of non-European gaze and being like okay with that and experiencing those things. Because I think even in Nigeria, like, and I'm not 100% sure, right? Like I am very, very much so socialized here in South Side of Chicago-esque, but from what I can understand, a lot of the main religion is still somewhat westernized, or, there's like Obviously Christian, like half my family, for example, half is Muslim, the other half is Christian, and
Yeah.
they just work it out. But I think even this book goes beyond that gaze, or beyond those, to go specific to where it is specific to culture, So I don't know. I think you're definitely onto something.
Yeah, we had Alexandra Flowerboy, who's in Nigeria, and they were saying that this book made a big splash in because it really was like a challenge towards a lot of the way that non-binary people experience life there in Nigeria, and it comments, and it very kind of not I don't want to say sneakily but slyly comments on the culture on the ground there.
Yeah, it's mad low key.
I got some of the hints. I lived in Houston for a couple of 16 months.
Oh yeah,
over
they have a
year.
huge Nigerian
Mini
population over there.
Biafra, right? And so like particularly the commentary around Yeshua made a lot of sense to me, because as I was saying in a previous discussion, it's not even just that like Nigerians will associate with Christianity, but like especially in the Igbo culture that I experienced in Houston, there was a big marker around your denomination. So whether you went to the Catholic Church, whether you were Anglican or Pentecostal, and it was like, a big identity marker about who you were and, how you came about in your community. Yeah. And so for Akwaeke to kind of push back and be like, what are you holding on to? And how has that person really showed up in your life? And not only is like, cause, how you say their friend's name from Georgia, Ayatin, Ihotan, they, like also what kind of harm have you caused other people because of your attachment to this identity? And missing what people, because she turns to Ayatin in a time of need, like after that's the person she calls after the Soren, scenario scene.
Absolutely.
And they're like, well, you did it to yourself. And so many of us Black women have experienced going through sexual assault and rape and calling someone after it happens. And,
yeah, that part really upset me.
Attachment to Christianity, they are telling you you caused this to happen to you.
And then I think also in that moment, maybe help me pronounce this right, but Asagara like comes out and is like, I'm gonna hang up the phone or something like that. And it's like, yes, all of these small acts, that conversation was a small act of violence, but that like small act of violence is traumatic, and also further brings out this deity, this Obanji. It's really interesting the ways in which trauma shows up in different ways, or even like with the parents, when Ada wanted to transition, is one word she uses to describe that. But yeah, it's like there's a lot of different forms of violence. And then the father,
he's a man and men barely exist.
You said it.
He just was a man. I wonder if the author's parents read this. And
that's what I was thinking the whole time.
Because it's a fictional biography. So like, how did the family, or even like because they do have an older brother and they do have a younger sister, they do have like it mirrors their life. And so I wonder how their family members who have a more complicated character arc in the book responded to this text.
Yeah, I was wondering that too. And I really love this writer. Is it Akwaeke? I'm pronouncing that terrible.
Akwaeke.
You thought you were bad. Akwaeke. But I read all of their books. I love their work. But I was looking at, when I was reading it the second time, for a narrative link between the death of Vivek Oji, which also has a trans character who is located in Nigeria. But there was a cousin in here that sounded like it might be that character. So yes, Uche. Yep. How you know?
Because Uche's the only cousin in the book.
Yeah, Uche. But really, though, I think that I think it's so interesting to call this like fiction, or I can't remember exactly what they call it, but this fiction biography.
Fictionalized biography. That's what I called it. But I
Yeah.
think there is an actual technical term for it.
Yeah, there is definitely. I can't remember what they call it, but also, what was I going to say? It also reminds me of Audre Lorde's Zami, or a biomythography.
Mm.
And that we
That's a good way to classify it.
that's what I'm thinking about it as. Even though it says a novel, but then it's true. It's really interesting.
Mm. So what was your favorite part of the book? Or maybe what do you think are some of the most crucial elements of the book?
I don't know. I don't know. That's a big question. There are so many things I love. I think one thing I'm thinking about right now, and maybe this is from the lens of a person who likes to write, who writes, who identifies as a writer, is the way in which Emezi was able to kind of tell these things that we know when we see, specifically the cutting, but through the lens of these deities, and that the deity, the Obanjis, made them do it, or it was seen as a sacrifice.
Mm.
Just like, I want to, as a writer, I'm like, oh, that's so creative, but it really is beyond that, because it doesn't play with, it doesn't say it's call itself fiction. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think I was just fascinated from the lens, the tri lens of, because the story is very elaborate, but it's also just like, I was going to college and then I came back. Like, it's nothing like super outrageous, obviously, the other
I mean,
than some of the
it's a
other
little,
than like all of the atrocities,
it's a
right?
little outrageous. It's a
But
little
I
outrageous.
think what you're right. You're completely right? But I think that, like, the story isn't like narratively told, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. It's just told from these different Obanjis, and occasionally we get out of. But I'm just fascinated with that perspective. And you're right. They're like huge atrocities that
But like to
occurred.
the point you're making, like I didn't, and maybe this is not something that I've talked about a lot. The self harm that even that whole trajectory of self harm, right? Like how it is positioned as a sacrifice, and how it calms the brother sisters that exist in the marble room of the Ada's mind, and then when and it's not something that the Ada proactively hides. I think we get a lot, and you think about it, like there's plenty of narratives, right, about like eating disorders or self harm, where there's a lot of work that goes into hiding,
Mm-hmm.
um, whatever the person is dealing with, and like the Ada's friend, like everyone that dealt with them, everyone that dated them, saw it, and they got to a part once they got to Brooklyn where it's like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. But when they really kind of came into the light of themselves, they get the tattoo. And
Mm-hmm.
so it becomes like it's not a past, it's not something that they ever tried to hide, but I do feel like they earnestly worked through what was happening to them, and then
Absolutely.
understand the sacredness of the trauma of it, but also like the sacredness of that being part of their journey.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And it doesn't like glorify the process. It just, as you were saying, it's like even giving language to this experience, to what's going on, and pushing people who might typically be very dismissive of somebody who self-harms,
Mm-hmm.
just being able
Exactly. I think
to
it just
interrogate them.
provides just a new lens. And I think, I just want to say, like, I didn't mean like nothing big happens, right? But I mean, like, I think the novel encapsulates itself in internal conflict, if that makes sense. There's like obviously things that happen outside of the world, but I think most of the novel takes place within this flesh, or within the mind of the flesh, which I
Hmm.
just think is really fascinating.
The marble room. I even like the
Mm,
definition, like the calling it the marble room.
mm,
I'm like, I have a strong natural voice. Like the voice in my head is loud. So maybe I need to think about what room is that voice sitting in? Like,
mm,
what space do they really exist in?
mm,
Because, for the character, the Ada, maybe, they had a splintering. So it's not that the voice in your head, right? The voice that exists in this marble room is bad, but they had a splintering
mm,
because of these traumatic events in their life that caused there to be uh voices or spirits or brothers, sisters, or beast gods, and however
mhm,
they refer to quite a few different markers throughout the book, but that they are, I forget what I was exactly going to say, but like, the splintering happened. And so there, what we would typically say as a singular natural voice or inside voice became these multiple identities. And
Yeah.
really, the only real harmful one was Ashugara.
You think so?
St. Vincent, I'm a fan.
But what about the we?
Well, the we is all of them, and the we is almost always like commentary
Mm.
on what Ashugara is doing or what St. Vincent did. There is one moment where like St. Vincent kind of like lets Ashugara wield their toxicity or whatever. But I felt like when St. Vincent came to the forefront, the progression in the Ada coming into themselves really moves
Mm.
forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely agree. But I think one thing I guess I'm just thinking about is the fact that Ada was born with these folks.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes I want, or I know that they're separate, but we starts the book, and I don't know, I just think about the way in which they talk about being born. Or there was this one line somewhere at the end of chapter 2, God be with me, but that was like the first madness was that we were born, that they stuffed a god into a bag of skin. And I don't know, it makes me wonder if this is like how we all started out.
No,
This being
I think
stuffed
because like
inside some skin.
like the ending of the book doesn't really let you have one definitive understanding of the
Mm,
Ada, right? So you can't say, oh, their brother, sister, their spirits, their multiple identities, their DID, their whatever you want to call it, simply
mm-hmm,
came as a response to trauma. Because as you're pointing out in
mm-hmm,
chapter 2, it's just, and that's discussing at their birth, right? Like when they were born, and when the Ada was born, that they were stuffed into this bag of flesh. And then they have this sort of, so like the ancestry, so as Alexandra was explaining, so Obanji is like that every generation has an Obanji
mm-hmm,
in Igbo culture, right? So every generation, and typically Obanji is just a mischievous spirit.
mm,
And that typically, and this book kind of pushes back on that because, and it's such an important commentary on that because, and therefore Yeshua, I'm sorry, I keep hyphening myself, but like, it's such an important commentary because of Yeshua's representation in the book,
mm,
because typically you deal with the Yobanji by taking them to church and exercising them. And so this book is actually saying why, not necessarily why, but like, have you thought about how you are using Christianity against your own culture? And is
mm,
there not another way to embrace your ancestral gods, right? Your ancestral spirits.
mm-hmm.
But that so that every generation kind of has an Obanji and it's mischievous. So Ada being Obanji doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have multiple identities, but it does
Right.
mean that they have a mischievous spirit within them. And
Which is
so,
fun.
yeah, I mean, I definitely think by the end of the book that the Ada at the end is probably a really fun person to be around.
Mm.
You're like, no.
No, for sure, for sure. I just love the idea of this evolving, and not just Ada evolving, but all of the different perspectives that are presented in the book evolving by the end of this. I just love that.
Mm, yeah, and you kind of have to you grow with it.
Mm-hmm.
Did any of the
Yeah,
characters remind you of people in your life?
that's deep. Ha! Everybody and they mama. No, yeah, for sure. They remind me of so many different people that I love who hurt or who have been hurt, and I don't know, do these things, and do these things, that these self-sacrifices, if you will, um and don't necessarily have the tools of cultural and indigenous religion and ideologies to move through it, you know so yes, I feel like it came up quite a bit. I mean, even myself, existing, or like as I'm moving through this and reading this, I'm looking for myself. I think I'm not like a conceited or self-centered person, but I think that is part of why we read, is to really just move through, to see something outside ourselves, and then also maybe see something about ourselves. So I don't know. It was I saw some folks that I wanted to be, or some people I was like, what would it be like to be Ashigara? You know, I don't know. I feel like it was relatable in a lot of different avenues and areas, whether it be parents showing up or not showing up, you know. Oh, what's that face?
We said parents. I'm like, Dad, is there like a person of authority who reminds you of like any of the Ada spirits? And I'm like, no, fortunately. I thought it was interesting because, at least Ashugara and St. Vincent, well, St. Vincent doesn't really command the flesh the way Ashugara does, but like the Ada would be dressed as Ashugara. Like that was like, there was a lot of autonomy given specifically to that identity.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, especially considering that Ashigara might have, or at least Ashigara believes that they saved Ada as well in that moment, you know, when they were born. So I think it would make sense that they felt compelled to own the flesh and dress and all of those things like that. I think that also reminds me of that moment when Ashigara realizes that Ada has some tequila or something and is like, oh, I wish I would have known, I would have been using this, which is, I just thought that was interesting. And, you know, sidebar, maybe once upon a time on TikTok, you know, there was this thing that was just like, you know, some people don't drink alcohol, which Ada doesn't drink alcohol through the whole novel, but some people don't drink it because it brings you closer to the spirits, which is why it's called spirits. And I was just like, whoa, this is too much. You know,
that's
I don't know.
That's a thought.
It's really a thought.
Because Ada is not I drink because I like the taste of, bourbon and whiskey. So that's why I drink it. And the Ada very much so like drinks to get drunk. Like, it's not drinking to get drunk. They're drinking to, quail something, to calm something within them. They're drinking to survive.
Legit.
All right, we're going to wrap up here. You have any?
What? We just got here.
Ending points? I mean, it's been an hour.
No, I'm just kidding. Ending points. Wow, that feels grave and heavy. I don't know. I don't know. Like big. It feels big. There's no summative statement. I need to go read this book like 5 more times, you know. And if you haven't, I hope this inspires you to do so.
I hope people really do give this book a chance. I understand if it doesn't connect with you at first, but and it's not a hard read, right? It's also not a long read.
It's not.
I love this so much. So thank you for joining us. You want to let the people know how to find you?
Sure. I'm on the internet. No, I mostly am on Instagram at porsha olayiwola. We'll write it into the chat or something.
It's in the title of the video.
Boom. There we go.
Name spelled properly.
But read this and also check out some of their other work. Pet is pretty incredible. It's for a much, much, much younger audience. And then The Death of Vivek. Oh, gee, if you're interested in something just as beautiful.
Yes. At in the syllabus, we have further readings. So we have all their books listed, and we also have quite a few of the articles. Because in the physical copy of the book, there is an essay at the end that was published, Writing into the Unknown. It is an essay which first appeared on BuzzFeed Reader in February 2018. So they published for like the Asian American Pacific something like journal entries, right? And so their writing overall is just amazing. And they also, is it Michael B. Jordan is going to produce their most recent book, Dear Slytherin, into Amazon Prime series? Or
I didn't
HBO
know.
Max or something. It just came out like 2 days ago.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I hope they do it justice.
Me too. Me too. Because they always messing up some stuff. But I would expect nothing else from them.
Well, Akwaeke is going to be executive director or something on it, I believe. So they'll be in the room. So, all right, we're going to end here. Thank y'all for joining. Everyone go enjoy their Friday. Get some sunshine. See y'all later. Bye.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye.